The fluorescent lights above my head buzzed like dying wasps, casting a sickly yellow glow over the diner's checkered floor. My feet throbbed in my worn sneakers. The left sole had split 3 days ago, and every step sent a jolt of pain through my arch. I ignored it. I'd learned to ignore a lot of things. The ache in my lower back, the gnawing hunger that coffee couldn't quite suppress, the pitying looks from customers who left crumpled dollar bills as tips. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, and Rosie's diner was almost empty. Just the usual stragglers, old Joe nursing his 5th cup of decaf in the corner booth, and a couple of truckers who'd been arguing about baseball for the past hour. The air smelled of burnt coffee, frying oil, and the lemon-scented cleaner I'd used to wipe down the counters, again and again. Anything to keep moving, to keep busy, to keep my mind from wandering to the pile of medical bills shoved in my kitchen drawer. My mother's cancer treatments weren't covered by insurance. At least, not all of them. The experimental therapy her oncologist recommended cost more than I made in 6 months, and the hospital's billing department had started calling twice a day. I'd stopped answering. "Table 6 needs a refill, sweetheart," Marlene called from behind the counter, her gravelly voice cutting through my thoughts. She'd worked at Rosie's for 30 years, and her tired eyes told me she understood exhaustion in a way most people didn't. I grabbed the coffee pot and headed toward the booth, my reflection ghosting across the dark windows. 24 years old, and I looked 40. My blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to frame a face too pale, too thin. My mother used to say I had her eyes, bright blue, like summer sky. Now they just looked dull. The bell above the door chimed. I glanced up out of habit, and the coffee pot nearly slipped from my hand. 3 men walked in, and they didn't belong here. Not in this part of town, not in this grimy diner that smelled like yesterday's meatloaf. The first 2 were massive, mountains of muscle in dark suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They moved like predators, their eyes scanning the room with calculated precision, noting exits, occupants, potential threats. But it was the 3rd man who made my breath catch. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit like it had been painted on. Dark hair, impeccably styled. A face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, lips set in a line that suggested he rarely smiled, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place. Even from across the room I could feel their weight. Dark. Intense. Ancient, somehow, like they'd seen things that would break ordinary people. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer. One of the bodyguards, the one with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, moved ahead, checking the bathroom, peering into the kitchen. Marlene's eyes widened, and she took an involuntary step back. The truckers had gone silent, their argument forgotten. The man in the center, the one who commanded the room simply by existing, walked to a booth near the back, not the cleanest one, not the one with the best view, the one with sightlines to both doors and no windows behind it. His cologne reached me before I consciously moved toward him, expensive, woody, with notes of bergamot and something darker, more dangerous. It didn't belong in Rosie's diner any more than he did. "I'll take this one," I heard myself say to Marlene, though my voice sounded distant, tinny. She grabbed my wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Honey, maybe it's fine." I pulled away gently, smoothing my stained apron. Tips were tips, and men in suits like that usually had money to spare. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum as I approached. The bodyguards flanked the booth, standing sentinel. Up close, I could see the bulges under their jackets, guns. Jesus. My hands trembled as I clutched my order pad. "Good evening," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I get you gentlemen something?" The scarred bodyguard ignored me. The other one, younger, with cold blue eyes, glanced at his boss, waiting. The man in the center looked up, and the full force of those dark eyes hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. There was something primordial in that gaze, something that spoke of violence and control and absolute certainty. This was a man who'd never been told no in his life, a man who took what he wanted and destroyed anything that stood in his way. "Coffee," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest hint of an Italian accent softened by years in America. "Black." "Of course." I scribbled it down, though my hand shook. Anything else? We have just coffee. His eyes hadn't left my face. He was studying me, cataloging details with the same intensity his guards had assessed the room. I felt exposed, like he could see through my thin uniform to all the broken, struggling parts of me I tried so hard to hide. I nodded and fled to the counter, my heart hammering. Who the hell is that? I whispered to Marlene as I poured coffee into our best china cup, the one without chips. She'd gone pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Trouble. That's who. Don't stare. Don't ask questions. And for God's sake, don't do anything to piss him off. Helpful, I muttered, but my stomach twisted with unease. I carried the coffee back on a small tray, hyper-aware of every step, every movement. The bodyguards watched me like hawks tracking a mouse. When I set the cup in front of him, I noticed his hands, strong, elegant, with a thick silver ring on his right index finger. The design was unusual, an intricate pattern of vines and thorns wrapped around what looked like a family crest. The metal was old, oxidized in the grooves, like it had been worn for generations. My blood turned to ice. I knew that ring. Is something wrong? His voice cut through my paralysis, sharp and precise. No, My throat closed. I couldn't tear my eyes from the ring. The same vines, the same thorns, the same crest with its crowned lion and crossed swords. My mother had a ring exactly like it. She'd worn it on a chain around her neck for as long as I could remember, tucked beneath her blouse where no one could see. She never talked about it, never explained where it came from. When I was little, I'd asked once, and she'd gotten a look in her eyes, terrified and sad and far away, that made me never ask again. Miss. One of the bodyguards moved closer, his hand drifting toward his jacket. Sorry, I blurted, stepping back. Your ring. It's beautiful. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Curiosity. Or maybe suspicion. Thank you. He lifted the cup to his lips, dismissing me. I should have walked away. Should have kept my mouth shut and minded my own business. But the bills. My mother's medical bills, the experimental treatment, the collection agencies, the desperation that had become my constant companion for the past 6 months. Sir, I heard myself say, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother has a ring like yours. The coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The bodyguards tensed, hands moving beneath their jackets. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder, more aggressive. He set the cup down slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving mine. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerously soft. What did you say? My pulse thundered in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to apologize, to pretend I'd never spoken. But I thought of my mother's frail body in that hospital bed, her skin paper-thin and bruised from IVs. I thought of the doctor's grim prognosis without treatment. My mother, I repeated, my voice shaking. She has a ring exactly like that one. Same design, same crest. I've never seen another one like it before. The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire ready to snap. Your mother's name, he said finally. Not a question. A command. Elena. Elena Rossi. I didn't see him move, but suddenly he was standing, towering over me. His face had gone absolutely still, carved from stone. The air around him crackled with something dark and dangerous. Where is she? St. Mary's Hospital, 4th floor. But she's very sick. The doctors... My voice cracked. He turned to the scarred bodyguard. Marco, car, now. Boss, Marco began. Now. The authority in that single word made my knees weak. This wasn't a man who made requests. He gave orders, and people obeyed or suffered consequences I probably couldn't imagine. Marco pulled out a phone, speaking rapidly in Italian. The man turned back to me, and I realized I'd been wrong earlier. Those eyes weren't just intense. They were haunted, tormented. Whatever he'd seen in his life had carved canyons into his soul. You're coming with me, he said. What? No, I can't. I'm working, You're coming with me, he repeated. And there was something in his voice that made it clear this wasn't negotiable. We're going to see your mother, and then you're going to tell me everything. I don't even know who you are, Dante Salvatore. He said it like I should recognize the name. Like it should mean something, and maybe, in some circles, it did. But I was just a waitress in a dying diner, struggling to keep my mother alive. I didn't know about mob bosses or crime families or the kind of power that made grown men flinch. Not yet. I need to tell Marlene. Already handled. Marco had reappeared, holding my coat. My coat. From the back room. How? This is insane, I whispered, even as I let him help me into it. I can't just leave with strangers. I don't. Dante stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Smell that expensive cologne mixed with something else. Danger, maybe. Or violence barely leashed. His hand came up, and I flinched. But he only tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. Elena Rossi, he said softly, was promised to me 25 years ago. She disappeared the night before our wedding, and I have been looking for her ever since. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible. My mother was never... She would have told me. Would she? His smile was bitter, sharp enough to draw blood. There's a lot your mother hasn't told you, Piccola, and tonight you're going to learn exactly who you are. He turned toward the door, his bodyguards falling into formation around him. Around us. Wait. My voice came out as a squeak. What do you mean? Who I am? Dante looked back over his shoulder, and in his eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold and hot all at once. Possession. Certainty. Inevitability. You're wearing your mother's face, he said quietly. Her eyes. Her defiance. And if she has that ring, then you... He paused, something dark and possessive crossing his features. Then you belong to me. The car was unlike anything I'd ever been near, let alone inside. A black Mercedes, the kind with windows so dark you couldn't see through them from the outside. The leather seats were butter soft, the interior smelling of expensive materials, and that same woody cologne that clung to Dante Salvatore like a second skin. Marco drove while the other bodyguard, I heard Dante call him Luca, sat in the passenger seat, both men silent and alert. I was trapped in the back with Dante. He hadn't touched me since we left the diner, but I could feel him in the darkness beside me, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. The city lights streaked past the windows as we drove through streets I'd walked 1,000 times. But everything looked different from inside this car. Foreign. Like I was seeing my world through a lens that revealed its shabbiness, its poverty, its desperate struggling. Tell me about the ring, Dante said, his voice cutting through the silence. I pressed myself against the door, trying to maintain distance. I don't know anything about it. She's always had it. Wears it on a chain. She never spoke of its origin? No. I swallowed hard. She doesn't talk about her past. I don't even know who my father was. She won't... My voice cracked. She won't tell me. I felt, rather than saw him shift in the darkness. When was she diagnosed? 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The doctor said... Couldn't say the words that had been haunting me since that awful afternoon in the oncologist's office. And the treatments? Expensive. The word tasted bitter. There's an experimental therapy that might help, but insurance won't cover it. I've been working doubles, picking up extra shifts wherever I can, but it's not enough. It's never enough. The silence that followed felt heavy with judgment. What must I look like to him? A struggling waitress in a stained uniform, begging for scraps, barely keeping her head above water. He probably saw dozens of people like me every day, the desperate, the powerless, the invisible. How much? He asked. What, the treatment? How much does it cost? I laughed, but it came out choked. Why? You gonna write me a check out of pity? Answer the question. The command in his voice made me flinch. $250,000, which I don't have. Will never have. I turned to face him, anger flaring hot in my chest. Look, I don't know what you want from me, or what my mother supposedly did to you 25 years ago, but I'm not her. Whatever debt you think she owes, it's not mine to pay. Isn't it? He leaned forward, and the passing streetlights illuminated his face in flashes, sharp angles, hard eyes. If Elena Rossi is who I think she is, then you are Salvatore blood, my blood. And in my world, debts pass from generation to generation until they're settled. Fear spiked through me. I don't understand. What are you saying? I'm saying, Piccola, that your mother didn't just run from a wedding. She ran from a dynasty, from an oath sworn in blood by both our families. The Rossi family and the Salvatore family were bound together for 3 generations, sealed with those rings you seem to recognize. He shifted closer, and I could smell the danger on him now, sharp and metallic. When she disappeared, she didn't just break my heart, she broke a sacred covenant. And that kind of betrayal, he paused, that kind of betrayal has consequences. The car pulled up to St. Mary's Hospital, the building's harsh fluorescent light spilling across the parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't unclasp my seatbelt. Luca opened my door, offering his hand, but I ignored it and stumbled out on my own. The night air was cold, biting through my thin coat. I'd left the diner without my purse, without my phone, without anything. Just me and these 3 dangerous men in their expensive suits and their guns and their talk of blood oaths and dynasties. 4th floor? Dante asked, already moving toward the entrance. Wait, you can't just... Visiting hours are over. They won't let you. He turned back, one eyebrow raised. Won't they? And I realized, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that doors didn't close for men like Dante Salvatore. Rules didn't apply. He moved through the world like a king through his kingdom, and everyone else simply stepped aside. The hospital lobby was quiet. Just a tired security guard at the desk, and a few nurses moving between floors. The guard looked up as we entered, started to say something about visiting hours, then saw Dante and went pale. He swallowed whatever words he'd been about to speak, and looked back down at his computer screen, just like that. No argument. No resistance. We took the elevator in silence. Marco and Luca flanked us, their hands resting casually near their weapons. I watched the floor numbers tick upward and wondered what the hell I'd gotten myself into. What had seemed like a strange coincidence in the diner now felt like fate closing its jaws around me. The 4th floor was dimmer than the lobby, most of the rooms dark behind closed doors. The nurse's station was empty, except for one young woman typing on a computer. She glanced up, did a double take at our group, and wisely said nothing. This way, I whispered, leading them down the corridor. My mother's room was at the end, room 417. I'd memorized every detail of that space over the past 6 months. The beige walls, the industrial linoleum, the single window that looked out over the parking lot, the steady beep of the heart monitor, the IV stand with its bags of fluids and medications that cost more per drop than I made in an hour. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the handle. She's sleeping. The medications make her tired. Open it, Dante said softly. I did. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitors. My mother looked so small in the hospital bed, her body barely making a dent in the mattress. She'd lost so much weight that her collarbones jutted out sharply, and her hair, once thick and dark like mine had been before I bleached it, was thin and gray. The chain around her neck glinted in the low light. The ring. Dante saw it too. He moved past me with the silent grace of a predator, stopping at the foot of her bed. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his face an unreadable mask. Then he spoke, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. Elena. My mother's eyes fluttered open, groggy at first, confused, then focused on the man at the foot of her bed, and I watched my mother's face transform into an expression of pure, abject terror. No, she breathed. No, no, no. Hello, mia promessa, my promised one. The Italian rolled off his tongue like honey laced with poison. It's been a long time. Dante. His name came out as a sob. Please. Please, I can explain. 25 years. He moved around the bed slowly, deliberately, 25 years I've searched for you. Do you know what that does to a man, Elena? To wake up on his wedding day and find his bride vanished? To wonder every day if you were dead in a ditch somewhere, or if you'd chosen to leave? Tears streamed down my mother's gaunt cheeks. I had to. You don't understand. I had to. Had to? His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow sounded more dangerous than a shout. Had to steal from my family? Had to disappear with $3 million that wasn't yours? Had to make me look like a fool in front of every family from New York to Sicily? $3 million. The words hit me like a slap. Mom? My voice sounded small, childish. What is he talking about? She finally looked at me, and the guilt in her eyes told me everything. Sweetheart, I never wanted you to know. I wanted to protect you from what? I demanded, my voice rising. From the truth? From knowing that you're a thief, that you... I couldn't finish. Couldn't process what I was hearing. I did it for you, she cried. I was pregnant. I was carrying you. And I knew. I knew what kind of life you'd have if I married him. What kind of world you'd grow up in. The violence, the blood, the constant fear. I couldn't do that to you. So I took the money and I ran, and I gave you a normal life. Normal? I laughed, hysterical. We've been poor my entire life. Living paycheck to paycheck, struggling for everything. You call that normal? You were safe, she whispered. That's all that mattered. Dante had gone very still. You were pregnant. It wasn't a question, but my mother nodded anyway, her hand reaching toward me, with his daughter, with you. The room spun. I grabbed the windowsill to steady myself. No, that's not possible. You said my father left before I was born. You said I lied. Her voice broke. I've lied about everything to keep you safe. But now... She looked at Dante with something like resignation. Now he's found us, and there's no running anymore. Dante's eyes were on me, burning with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You're telling me, he said slowly, each word deliberate, that this girl is my daughter? Yes, my mother whispered. That for 25 years I've had a child I knew nothing about? Yes. That you stole my money, my bride, and my daughter, and you've been living under my nose in my own city this entire time? She faltered. We were in California for years. We only came back 6 months ago when I got sick. I couldn't afford the treatments there, and I thought enough time had passed that I'd forget. He laughed, and it was the coldest sound I'd ever heard. That I'd move on? Elena, you foolish, foolish woman. The Salvatores never forget, and we never forgive. He turned to Marco. Call Giovanni. Tell him to come to the hospital. We need a DNA test immediately. And get DeMarco on the phone. I want that experimental treatment set up by morning. Wait, I said, my mind struggling to catch up. You're going to pay for her treatment? Of course. He said it like it was obvious. She's the mother of my child. That makes her family. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name. I don't know you. I don't care what some DNA test says. You're not my father. My father is... No one, he interrupted. Your father is no one. But I am Dante Salvatore, head of the Salvatore family, and if you are my blood, then you are mine. My daughter, my heir, my responsibility. He stepped closer, and I found myself backed against the window with nowhere to go. And make no mistake, Piccola. If that test comes back positive, your life as you know it is over. You will come live in my home. You will be protected by my men. You will learn our ways, our traditions, our business. You will take your rightful place in this family. And if I refuse, his smile was sharp enough to cut. You won't. You can't just kidnap me. This is America. There are laws. Laws, he repeated, amused. Yes, there are laws. And I own half the judges in this city, most of the police force, and enough politicians to make anything I want legal. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. You can fight me if you want. You can scream and kick and insist on your independence, but in the end, you will learn what your mother tried to run from. When you belong to the Salvatores, there is no escape. I looked at my mother, pleading silently for her to do something, say something, tell me this was all a nightmare I'd wake up from. But she just lay there, tears streaming down her face, her hand clutching that damned ring around her neck. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby." The door opened, and a man in a white coat entered, carrying a medical kit. He took one look at Dante and nodded. "Mr. Salvatore, I'll need samples from both of them." "No," I said, pressing myself harder against the window. "I don't consent. You can't—" Dante's hand shot out, gripping my chin and forcing me to look at him. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that I couldn't look away. "This is happening. Whether you cooperate or not, you can make it easy, or you can make it difficult. Choose." His eyes held mine, and I saw the truth there. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't asking. This was simply how his world worked, he decided, and reality bent to accommodate him. My voice came out small, defeated. "Easy. I'll make it easy. Smart girl." He released me, stepping back. The doctor was efficient, taking blood from my arm and then my mother's. The whole process took maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. When he was done, he turned to Dante. "I'll have preliminary results by morning. Full confirmation within 48 hours. Morning," Dante confirmed. "And the cancer treatment? I've already contacted Dr. Richardson. She's the leading specialist in experimental therapies. I'll have her here first thing tomorrow to examine Mrs. Rossi and set up a protocol." "Good." Dante's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and possessive. "Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow your daughter and I have much to discuss." "Please," my mother begged. "Please don't punish her for my mistakes. She's innocent in all this." "Innocent?" Dante's laugh was bitter. "There's no such thing as innocence in our world. She's been innocent for 25 years, living in ignorance while her birthright waited. No more." He looked down at me, his dark eyes unreadable. "Starting tomorrow, Sophia becomes who she was always meant to be." "How did you—" I started, then realized. "You had Marco search my coat, my ID. I know everything about you now, Sophia Marie Rossi, where you live, where you work. That you dropped out of community college 2 years ago to help your mother. That you have no friends, no boyfriend, no life beyond these hospital walls and that pathetic diner." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, the gesture almost tender. "That ends now. Tomorrow you stop being no one. Tomorrow you become a Salvatore." He released me and headed for the door, Marco and Luca falling into step behind him. "Get your affairs in order," he called back without turning. "Pack what matters. Everything else we'll replace. Marco will pick you up at noon tomorrow." "And if I'm not there?" He paused in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the harsh hallway lights. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. "Then I'll come get you myself. And trust me, Piccola, you don't want that." The door closed behind them with a soft click. I stood there trembling, my mind reeling. My mother was sobbing quietly in her bed, and all I could think was that 6 hours ago, I'd been a waitress. Poor, exhausted, invisible. Now I was supposedly the daughter of a Mafia boss, an heir to a criminal empire. And somewhere in the darkness of the parking lot below, Dante Salvatore was probably already making plans for the daughter he'd just discovered. The daughter who, if that DNA test came back positive, belonged to him whether she wanted to or not. I didn't sleep that night. After Dante left, I'd pulled a chair close to my mother's bed and held her hand while she cried. She told me everything, about the arranged marriage, about the Salvatore family's reach and power, about the night she'd realized she was pregnant and couldn't bring a child into that world, about stealing the money from a safe in Dante's father's study, money meant for a weapons deal, and disappearing into the night. "I thought we'd be safe in California," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I changed our names, paid cash for everything, never stayed in one place too long. But then the cancer came, and the bills—" She broke down again. I had no choice but to come back. The treatment centers here were the only ones that would work with me on payment plans. "You should have told me," I said, though the anger had drained out of me hours ago, replaced by a numb exhaustion. I deserved to know. I wanted to protect you from him, from that life. Her fingers tightened around mine. Dante Salvatore isn't just dangerous, Sophia. He's ruthless, calculating. Once he decides something is his, he never lets go. And now that he knows about you, she couldn't finish. I'd left the hospital at dawn, taking a bus back to my apartment as the city woke up around me. The buildings looked the same, the people rushing to work looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing through a veil that had been ripped away. How many of them knew about families like the Salvatores? How many walked past men like Dante every day, never realizing the violence and power that pulsed just beneath the surface of the city? My apartment was a studio in a building that should have been condemned years ago. Water stains on the ceiling, a radiator that clanked and hissed, neighbors who fought loud enough to shake the walls. I'd always hated it, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, my own sweat. I looked at the secondhand furniture, the clothes hanging in the cramped closet, the few photos of my mother and me scattered on the dresser. My entire life fit in this one room, and Dante had called it pathetic. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Marco will arrive at noon. Be ready. D. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Then I did something stupid. I typed back. What if the DNA test is negative? The response came immediately. It won't be. I can see myself in your eyes, Piccola. But if it is, I'll still own you. Your mother's debt remains. I threw the phone on the bed and pressed my palms against my eyes. This couldn't be happening. 24 hours ago, my biggest problem was scraping together rent money. Now, I was supposedly the daughter of a Mafia boss, and he was already talking about ownership like I was property to be claimed. The morning passed in a haze. I showered, standing under the weak spray until the water ran cold. I pulled my hair back, stared at my reflection in the spotted mirror. My mother's face. Dante had said it so certainly, like it was obvious, but I'd never thought I looked like anyone except myself. Now I studied my features with new eyes. The sharp angle of my jaw, the way my eyebrows arched, the shape of my mouth. Were those his? Had I been walking around with my father's face my entire life without knowing it? At 11:30, I packed a bag. A few changes of clothes, my mother's photo, the necklace she'd given me for my 18th birthday. I didn't know what to bring to a life I couldn't imagine, so I brought the things that mattered. Marco arrived exactly at noon, driving the same black Mercedes from last night. He didn't get out, just waited at the curb with the engine running. I locked my apartment door, wondering if I'd ever see it again. The thought should have terrified me more than it did. The drive took us away from my neighborhood, through streets that grew progressively cleaner, nicer, wealthier. We crossed into an area I'd only ever seen in magazines, Gramercy Park, where old money lived behind iron gates and manicured hedges. Marco pulled up to a townhouse that looked like it belonged in a museum. 4 stories of honey-colored stone, windows tall enough to walk through, a black door with brass fixtures that probably cost more than my yearly salary. 2 men in suits stood outside, their eyes tracking our car as we approached. "Mr. Salvatore is waiting inside," Marco said, his first words to me since picking me up. The interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art on the walls that I recognized from textbooks. Everything spoke of wealth so old, so established. It didn't need to announce itself. It simply was. A woman appeared, older, severe, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "This way, Miss Rossi." She led me through rooms that blurred together. A living room with furniture that looked too expensive to sit on, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a dining room with a table that could seat 20. We climbed a sweeping staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men who all had Dante's eyes. She stopped at a door near the end. "Mr. Salvatore's office. He's expecting you." I knocked, my heart in my throat. "Enter." Dante sat behind a massive desk, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He was reading something on his laptop, a glass of amber liquid at his elbow. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes assessing. "Sit." I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. my bag clutched in my lap like a shield. "The DNA results came back an hour ago," he said without preamble. "You're mine. 99.9% certainty." The word should have shocked me, but I'd already known. Some part of me had recognized it the moment I saw him in the diner, the familiarity in his features, the instant connection that had felt like destiny. "So now what?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now you learn." He stood, moving around the desk to perch on its edge, closer to me. "You learn about your family, your heritage, your responsibilities. You learn how to move through our world without getting yourself killed." "I don't want to be part of your world. Want is irrelevant," he said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "You are Salvatore blood. That makes you a target. Every rival family, every ambitious soldier, every enemy I've made over 30 years. They'll all see you as leverage, a weakness to exploit." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his face inches from mine. "So you can either accept my protection, live here where my men can keep you safe, learn how to defend yourself and navigate the dangers, or you can refuse, go back to your pathetic apartment, and wait for someone to use you against me. Maybe they'll kidnap you. Maybe they'll hurt you to send me a message. Maybe they'll kill you just to watch me bleed." His hand came up, cupping my jaw. "Choose, Sophia, but choose wisely." I wanted to pull away, to insist I didn't need him or his protection, but the cold logic of his words sank in. If I really was his daughter, if people knew, then I was already in danger just by existing. "What about my mother?" I asked. "Her treatment. Already arranged. Dr. Richardson started her on the experimental protocol this morning. She'll have the best care money can buy, around-the-clock nursing, everything she needs. And in exchange?" His smile was sharp. "In exchange, you stay here. You do as I say. You become who you were meant to be." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "My daughter, my heir, mine to protect and mold and keep safe from a world that would devour you." There was something possessive in his touch, something that went beyond fatherly concern. It made my skin prickle with awareness and fear in equal measure. "I need rules," I said. "Boundaries. I'm not a prisoner. Aren't you?" He released me, standing. "But fine. You want rules? You don't leave this house without Marco or Luca. You don't contact anyone from your old life without my approval. You attend the lessons I arrange. Self-defense, weapons training, etiquette, languages. You learn our business, our allies, our enemies. And if I break these rules, then I'll remind you that I'm not just your father. I'm the head of this family, and when I give an order, it's obeyed." He moved to the window, his back to me. "Your mother tried to run from me once. It took 25 years, but I found her. Don't make her mistake, Sophia. There's nowhere you can go that I won't follow." A knock at the door interrupted us. A man entered, older than Dante, maybe 60, with silver hair and sharp eyes. He carried a folder. "Giovanni," Dante greeted. "Results?" "Confirmed, as expected." Giovanni's eyes slid to me, assessing. "She's yours, no question. Good. Start the paperwork. I want her legal identity changed within the week. Sophia Salvatore. And set up accounts. She'll need credit cards, a phone on our secure network, everything." "Wait," I protested. "You can't just change my name without my permission." "I can do anything I want," Dante said calmly. "But if it makes you feel better, consider it protection. Sophia Rossi was vulnerable, invisible, prey. Sophia Salvatore is untouchable." He turned back to me. "Which would you rather be?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right, damn him. A name was just a name, but the power behind it, that could mean the difference between life and death. "Fine," I whispered. "Sophia Salvatore." Something flashed in Dante's eyes. Triumph, maybe. Or satisfaction. "Maria will show you to your room," he said. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late." I stood on shaking legs, heading for the door. "Sophia." I paused, looking back. "Welcome home, figlia mia." "My daughter." The Italian rolled off his tongue like a brand, marking me as his. The room Maria showed me to was bigger than my entire apartment. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silk. A sitting area with a fireplace. A bathroom with marble and gold fixtures. A walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size. Designer labels I recognized from magazines but had never dreamed of owning. Mr. Salvatore had everything prepared this morning, Maria explained. If anything doesn't fit or suit your taste, just let me know. I ran my hands over the clothes. Cashmere, silk, fine wool. Each piece probably cost more than I made in a month. How did he know my size? Maria's expression didn't change. Mr. Salvatore is very thorough. After she left, I sank onto the bed, my mind reeling. Everything was moving too fast. Yesterday, I was nobody. Today, I was Sofia Salvatore, daughter of one of the most dangerous men in the city. And Dante, my father, had already taken control of every aspect of my life. My phone buzzed. A new one had appeared on the nightstand, sleek and expensive. Dinner at 7. Don't keep me waiting. D. I stared at the message, feeling the invisible chains tightening around me. He'd bought my mother's life with that treatment. He'd bought my compliance with protection I couldn't refuse. He'd bought me, as surely as if he'd put a price tag on my head. And the terrifying part? Some small, traitorous part of me was relieved to not be struggling anymore. Relieved to have someone powerful enough to solve the problems that had been drowning me. Relieved to finally belong somewhere, even if that somewhere was a golden cage. The first week passed in a blur of lessons and rules and adjustments that left my head spinning. Every morning at 6, Marco knocked on my door to escort me to the gym in the basement. A man named Victor, built like a tank with a thick Russian accent, taught me self-defense. Not the kind they showed in movies, all flashy kicks and dramatic moves. Real defense. How to break a grip. Where to strike to disable an attacker. How to move so I didn't telegraph my intentions. You are small, Victor said on the third day, circling me on the mat. Weak. Soft. This makes you target. But small can be advantage if you use brain. He lunged, and I did what he'd taught me. Stepped inside his reach, drove my elbow up into his solar plexus, used his momentum against him. He grunted, actually impressed. Better. But in real fight, you must commit. Half measure gets you killed. After training came breakfast. Dante always ate at 7:30, sitting at the head of that enormous dining table while I perched at his right hand. He'd read the newspaper, an actual printed newspaper, and asked me questions about what Victor had taught me, what I'd learned the day before, whether I was adapting. The questions felt like tests, like he was constantly assessing, measuring, determining my worth. Marco tells me you tried to leave the house yesterday, he said on the fourth morning, not looking up from his paper. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. I'd only gone as far as the front door, wanting to walk to the corner bodega for a candy bar, something normal from my old life. Marco had appeared from nowhere, his hand on my arm, his voice gentle but firm. Mr. Salvatore's rules, Miss Sofia. I just wanted some air, I said to Dante now. Then you ask me, or Marco, or Luca. You don't just walk out. He finally looked at me, his dark eyes steady. I'm not being cruel, Sofia. Last week the Rossetti family lost their youngest son, walked out of their home without security, thought he was invisible. They found him in an alley with his throat cut. My stomach turned. Why? Because the Moretti family wanted to send a message. He folded his paper, giving me his full attention. This is the world you're part of now. Every move you make has consequences. Every vulnerability can be exploited. You think I'm imprisoning you, but I'm keeping you alive. After breakfast came lessons with Giovanni. He taught me the family business. Not the details, not yet, but the structure. The legitimate holdings, import, export companies, restaurants, real estate. The less legitimate, protection rackets, gambling, loan sharking. The completely illegal, weapons, drugs in limited territories, and things Giovanni only hinted at with euphemisms. Your father controls the eastern seaboard, Giovanni explained, showing me maps with territories marked in red. 5 families answer to him. Another 3 are independent but cooperative. Only the Morettis actively challenge his authority. Why? Because they're ambitious and stupid. Giovanni's smile was thin. The old Don, Vincent Moretti, knew better than to push. But his son Marco took over 2 years ago, and he thinks youth equals strength. He's wrong. I studied the maps, the names, the complex web of alliances and rivalries. It felt like learning a foreign language, one spoken in violence and blood. Afternoons were for languages. An elegant woman named Isabella taught me Italian, not the tourist phrases, but the real language, the dialect my father's family spoke. She was patient but exacting, correcting my pronunciation until I got it right. "Your father wants you fluent within 6 months," she said. "It's the language of the family. You must be able to understand everything said in your presence." By evening I was exhausted, but that's when Dante wanted me, in his office, reviewing what I'd learned, drilling me on names and faces and relationships. He'd show me photos, ask me to identify who was friend and who was foe, what their weaknesses were, how they might be used. "This is Don Carmine Russo," he'd say, tapping a photo of a heavy-set man with kind eyes. "What do you see? He looks friendly. He's killed more men than you've met in your entire life, but he values loyalty above all else. So you approach him with respect, acknowledge his position, and never ever make him doubt where your allegiances lie." He moved to the next photo. "And this?" A young man, maybe 30, with a cocky smile. "Marco Moretti?" "Good." "What's his weakness?" I thought back to Giovanni's lessons. "His ego. He wants to prove himself." "Exactly. Which makes him dangerous and predictable." Dante's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and warm. "You're learning, figlia mia." The praise shouldn't have mattered, but it did. On the 8th night, Dante announced we were going out. "Where?" I asked, anxiety spiking. "A restaurant. One of ours." He studied me critically. "Wear the black dress Maria put in your closet. And the pearls." The dress was beautiful and terrifying, sleeveless, form-fitting, falling to just above my knees. It made me look sophisticated, dangerous even. The pearls at my throat were real, heavy, worth more than my entire previous life. Maria did my makeup, transformed my face into something elegant and untouchable. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The exhausted waitress was gone. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged in Dante's world. He was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes, approval, possession, something else I couldn't name. "Perfect," he murmured, offering his arm. "Tonight you'll meet some of the other families. Watch, listen, learn." The restaurant was in Little Italy, an elegant establishment with white tablecloths and chandeliers. The maitre d' practically bowed when we entered, ushering us to a private room in the back. 6 men sat around a large table, all of them standing when we entered. They were older than Dante, 50s, 60s, dressed in expensive suits, their eyes calculating as they took me in. "Gentlemen," Dante said, his hand on the small of my back, proprietary. "Allow me to introduce my daughter, Sofia Salvatore." The word still felt foreign, but I kept my face neutral, remembering everything Giovanni had taught me. Don Russo was there, his friendly face hiding the killer beneath. Don Castellano, thin and hawk-like. Others whose names I forced myself to remember. "Your daughter," Don Russo repeated, his eyes sharp despite his smile. "We heard rumors, Dante, but to see her..." He moved closer, taking my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "She has her mother's beauty and her father's strength," Dante said, a warning in his voice. We sat, and food appeared, course after course of Italian specialties that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months of waitressing. The men talked business around me, speaking sometimes in English, sometimes in Italian. They thought I wouldn't understand the Italian parts. They were wrong. "The Moretti situation grows concerning," Don Castellano said in Italian. "Marco's ambitions exceed his intelligence." "Let him overreach," Dante replied in the same language. "Pride comes before the fall." They discussed territories, payments, problems with the unions. And through it all, they watched me. Testing, measuring, trying to determine if I was weakness or strength, vulnerability or asset. Halfway through dinner, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me, gentlemen." He stood, touching my shoulder. "Sophia, come with me." I followed him into the hallway, my heart racing. His face had gone cold, dangerous. "What's wrong?" "Someone made a move on your mother's hospital." His voice was steel. 3 men tried to enter her floor. Security stopped them. The world tilted. "Is she—" "She's fine. My men got there in time." He pulled me close, his hands gripping my arms. "This is what I meant, Sophia. This is why the rules exist. Someone knows about you now. Someone's trying to get leverage." "The Morettis?" "Almost certainly." His eyes burned into mine. "They're testing me, seeing if they can hurt me through you, through her." Fear clawed at my throat. "What are you going to do?" "What I always do." His smile was terrible. "Send a message they won't forget." He pulled out his phone, spoke rapid Italian. I caught words. "Immediate." "Example." "Make sure." When he hung up, his hands framed my face, forcing me to look at him. "You need to understand something. I am not a good man, Sophia. I've done things that would give you nightmares. I will continue to do those things to protect what's mine. And you—" His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. "Are mine now. My blood. My daughter. My responsibility. No one touches what belongs to me." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something else. Safety. Security. The knowledge that this dangerous, violent man would burn the world for me. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now we finish dinner. We smile. We show no weakness." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, the gesture surprisingly tender. "And tomorrow, Marco Moretti learns what happens when he threatens a Salvatore." We returned to the dinner, and I played my part. Smiled when appropriate, spoke when spoken to, showed nothing of the fear churning in my stomach. But under the table, Dante's hand found mine, squeezed once, a promise of protection. Later that night, back in my room at the townhouse, I stood at the window overlooking the garden. Somewhere in the city, my mother slept in her hospital bed, guarded by Dante's men. Somewhere else, Marco Moretti had just made a fatal mistake. And I stood here, in this beautiful prison, wearing designer clothes and real pearls, protected by a man who killed without hesitation. My phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "Sleep well, figlia mia. Tomorrow you learn what it truly means to be a Salvatore." I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the dark window. The waitress was gone. Sophia Rossi was gone. In her place stood Sophia Salvatore, daughter of a monster, heir to an empire built on blood and fear. And the most terrifying part, I was starting to accept it, starting to want it. The power. The protection. The belonging. I was starting to become exactly what he wanted me to be. The message arrived at dawn. I woke to pounding on my door, Maria's urgent voice cutting through my sleep. "Miss Sophia, your father needs you. Immediately." I threw on clothes, jeans and a sweater, my hands shaking, and followed her downstairs. The house was alive with tension. Men moved through hallways with purpose, speaking in low voices. The air crackled with barely contained violence. Dante stood in his office, still dressed in last night's suit, looking like he hadn't slept. Marco and Luca flanked him, along with 3 other men I'd seen but hadn't been introduced to. On his desk sat a photograph. "Look," Dante commanded as I entered. I approached slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The photo showed a man, young, maybe 25, slumped against a wall. His eyes were open but unseeing. Blood stained his shirt. On the wall above him, spray painted in red, "Touch my family again, and this is mercy." "Marco Moretti's cousin," Dante said, his voice empty of emotion. "He led the team that tried to reach your mother. Now he's a warning." I should have been horrified, should have run screaming from this man who ordered deaths like other people ordered coffee. But all I felt was cold satisfaction. They'd threatened my mother, and Dante had protected her, protected us. "The Morettis will retaliate," Giovanni said from the corner. I hadn't noticed him there. "Let them try." Dante's smile was razor-sharp. "I've been patient with Marco's provocations. That ends now. Giovanni, call a meeting. All 5 families. Tonight. It's time to remind everyone who runs this city." The men dispersed with nods and murmured agreements. Only Dante and I remained. You should be upset, he observed, studying me. Most people would be sick right now. Most people didn't grow up wondering if they'd eat that week, didn't watch their mother deteriorate because they couldn't afford medicine. I met his eyes steadily. You protected her. That's all that matters. Something shifted in his expression. You really are my daughter. He moved around the desk, pulling me into an embrace that surprised us both. His arms were solid, safe, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself lean into him. Let myself be held by this dangerous man who was my father. I won't let anyone hurt you, he murmured into my hair, or Elena. I swear it on my life, on my family name, on everything I am. I believed him. The meeting was set for midnight at a neutral location, an old warehouse by the docks that belonged to no one and everyone. Dante spent the day preparing, making calls, positioning his pieces on the board like a master chess player. You're coming, he announced at dinner. To the meeting? You're a Salvatore now. You need to be seen, known, understood as untouchable. He set down his wineglass. And you need to see what this life truly is. Not the mansion, not the money, the reality. At 11:30 we left, 3 cars this time, Dante and me in the middle vehicle, heavily armed men in the ones flanking us. The city slid past the windows, dark and glittering, hiding its secrets. The warehouse was enormous, empty except for a large table in the center surrounded by chairs. Guards lined the walls. Each family had brought their own, creating a tense armed standoff. The other Dons were already there, Don Russo, Don Castellano, 3 others whose names I'd memorized. And at the far end of the table, a young man with dark eyes full of rage, Marco Moretti. Dante's hand pressed against my lower back as we approached the table. Every eye followed us. The Dons assessed me with calculating gazes. Marco's burned with something darker. Gentlemen, Dante said, his voice carrying through the cavernous space. Thank you for coming. We have matters to discuss. You mean we need to discuss you murdering my cousin? Marco spat, half rising from his chair. Sit. The command in Dante's voice made everyone freeze. Your cousin led an assault on a civilian hospital. He threatened an innocent woman dying of cancer because you thought you could pressure me through her. You were wrong. She's not innocent, Marco snarled. Elena Rossi stole from you, $3 million, and you've been protecting her. She's the mother of my child. Dante's hand tightened on my waist. Which makes her family. And the money? He laughed, cold and sharp. Was recovered years ago. Did you really think I wouldn't find it? I've known where Elena was for the past 6 months. I simply chose to wait until the time was right to bring my daughter home. Shock rippled through the room. Even I hadn't known that. He'd known. Had been watching. Waiting. Your daughter, Marco repeated, his eyes sliding to me with open hostility. A waitress? You expect us to accept that she's one of us? I expect you to accept that she is my heir, Dante corrected. My blood. And anyone who touches her answers to me. Don Russo cleared his throat. With all respect, Dante, the girl is untrained, unknown. How can we be certain? Certain of what? Dante's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. That she's mine? DNA confirms it. That she's capable? Give her time. That she's worthy? He pulled out a chair, guided me into it at his right hand. The position of highest honor. She carries my blood. That makes her worthy. He remained standing, his hands on the back of my chair, radiating controlled violence. Now, let's discuss the real issue. Marco, you've been testing boundaries since your father died. Small provocations, territorial disputes. I've been patient because I respected Vincent. But patience has limits. Is that a threat? Marco's hand drifted toward his jacket. Instantly, every guard in the room tensed. Guns appeared from holsters. The air turned electric with potential violence. It's a fact, Dante said calmly. You have 2 choices. Accept that I run this city, fall in line, and prosper under my protection, or continue this path and discover why your father knew better than to challenge me. The silence stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the weight of dozens of eyes on me. This was the moment. War or peace. blood or submission. Marco's jaw worked. Pride warred with survival instinct. Finally, slowly, he sat back, his hand moving away from his weapon. "I want compensation," he said. "For my cousin." "No." The word was final. "Your cousin attacked my family. He got off easy with a bullet. Push me further, and I'll show you what real retribution looks like." Don Russo intervened, his voice soothing. "Perhaps we can reach an accord. Marco, your cousin overstepped. Badly." Dante responded proportionately. "Let it end here." One by one, the other Dons nodded. Even Don Castellano, usually Marco's ally, sided against him. Marco's face darkened with humiliation, but he nodded stiffly. "Fine. It ends here." "Good." Dante's hands left my chair. "Then let's discuss the real business. The port shipment arriving next week." The meeting continued for another hour, talk turning to logistics and profits and territory management. I sat quietly, absorbing everything, playing my part as the heir being introduced to the kingdom. When it finally ended, as men filed out, Marco paused by our seats. His eyes met mine, full of poison. "You think you're safe because Daddy's here to protect you," he said quietly. "But daddies don't live forever, and when he's gone, little girl, you'll learn what happens to pretenders." Before I could respond, Dante moved. One moment he was beside me, the next he had Marco by the throat, slammed against the table, a gun pressed under his chin. "Say that again," Dante whispered, his voice deadly calm. "Threaten my daughter one more time. Please, give me a reason." Marco's face turned purple. The other Dons had frozen, their guards unsure whether to intervene. "Dante," Don Russo said carefully, "let him go. The boy made a mistake. He won't repeat it." For a long moment, Dante didn't move. His finger rested on the trigger, one squeeze. That's all it would take. Then he released Marco, who collapsed gasping against the table. "Get him out of my sight," Dante said to Marco's guards. Before I changed my mind, they practically carried Marco from the warehouse. Dante turned to me, his eyes wild with barely controlled rage. "Did he hurt you? Say anything before—" "I'm fine," I assured him, touching his arm. "I'm okay." He pulled me close, his arms crushing me against his chest. I could feel his heart racing, feel the adrenaline singing through his body. "No one threatens you. No one. I'll burn this entire city before I let anyone hurt you." The ride back was silent, tension thick in the car. When we reached the townhouse, Dante dismissed everyone and led me to his office. He poured himself a scotch with shaking hands. "You need to understand something," he said, not looking at me. "What Marco said, he's not wrong. I'm 53 years old. I've been in this life since I was 15. The violence, the stress, the enemies, sooner or later something gives. And when I'm gone—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't talk like that." "I have to." He finally met my eyes. "Because you need to be ready. You need to be strong enough to hold this family together without me. That's why I'm pushing you so hard. Why the lessons, the training, the constant tests. I'm trying to prepare you for a world that will eat you alive if you show weakness." He downed the scotch in one swallow. "Your mother ran because she couldn't handle this life. I don't blame her for that. It's brutal and bloody and most people break. But you—" His hand cupped my face. "You're stronger than she was. I see it in you. The steel. The will to survive." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you alive. It's when you stop being afraid that you get careless." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "But you're not alone. You have me, my men, this family. We protect our own." Over the following weeks, something shifted between us. The formal distance melted into genuine connection. He taught me himself now, spending hours in his office explaining the nuances of power, how to read people, how to inspire loyalty and fear in equal measure. "Leadership isn't about being the strongest," he said one afternoon. "It's about being the smartest, the most strategic, knowing when to show mercy and when to be ruthless." He took me to meetings, introduced me to everyone who mattered, made sure every family, every soldier, every associate knew exactly who I was and what I represented. My mother's treatment worked. The experimental therapy shrank the tumors, gave her strength back. When she was finally released from the hospital, Dante had her moved into the townhouse, a suite on the 3rd floor with round-the-clock nursing care. The first time they saw each other properly, I watched from the doorway as 25 years of pain and anger and love played across their faces. "You look the same," my mother whispered. "Still so beautiful." "And you look terrible," Dante replied, but his voice was gentle. "But alive. That's what matters." "I'm sorry," she said, "for running, for taking her from you, for everything." "I know." He touched her hand briefly, the gesture loaded with history. "We'll discuss it when you're stronger. For now, rest, heal. Our daughter needs you." 3 months after that first night in the diner, I stood in Dante's office reviewing quarterly reports when Marco burst through the door, followed by Luca and 3 other guards. "We have a problem," Marco announced. "The Morettis just hit one of our warehouses, killed 4 men, took $500,000 in product." Dante's face went cold. "Marco Moretti? Who else? He's been quiet for months, but apparently he was just planning. He's declared war boss, official." The room erupted in activity. Phone calls, orders, strategy sessions. I watched my father transform into something terrifying, a general marshalling his forces, calculating moves and counter-moves with deadly precision. "Sophia," he said, turning to me, "this is going to get ugly. I need you safe, underground. Marco will arrange." "No." The word came out stronger than I expected. "You said I'm your heir, that I need to learn. So let me learn. Let me help. This isn't a lesson. This is war." "Then teach me war." I met his eyes steadily. "I'm not my mother. I won't run. I won't hide. If I'm going to lead this family someday, I need to see what that means. All of it." Pride and fear warred in his expression. Finally, he nodded. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. And Sophia." His hand gripped my shoulder. "If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." The next 72 hours were chaos. Dante mobilized every resource, called in every favor, positioned his forces with surgical precision. I stayed at his side through all of it, learning the reality of the life I'd inherited. The violence, the strategy, the cold mathematics of survival. The final confrontation came at dawn on the 4th day. Dante had lured Marco Moretti to a location of his choosing, an abandoned factory in Red Hook. Marco thought he was meeting a traitor in Dante's organization. Instead, he walked into an ambush. I watched from the car as Dante's men surrounded the building, cutting off every exit. Watched as Marco was dragged out, his face bloody, his men either dead or captured. Dante stood in the gray morning light, perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. "You had chances, Marco. I gave you opportunities to back down, to be smart. But you chose pride over survival." "Go to hell," Marco spat. "Probably." Dante pulled out his gun, checked the chamber with practiced ease. "But you'll get there first." He looked at me through the car window. Our eyes met, and I nodded. The gunshot echoed across the empty lot. Marco Moretti crumpled to the ground. The war was over. When Dante returned to the car, there was blood on his sleeve. He sat heavily beside me, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "I'm not." I took his hand, felt the weight of what he'd just done, what he'd done for years to build and maintain this empire. "You protected us. That's what family does." His fingers tightened around mine. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher. We sat there in the dawn light, father and daughter, bound by blood and violence and love that didn't quite fit normal definitions. 6 months after I'd served him coffee in a dying diner, I stood beside Dante at a gathering of the 5 families. He raised his glass, and everyone fell silent. "To my daughter," he announced. "Sophia Salvatore, my heir, my pride, the future of this family." "To Sophia," the room echoed. I met my mother's eyes across the room. She looked healthier now, the cancer in remission, her face filled with complicated emotions. Fear for what I'd become, pride in who I was, regret for the choices that had led us here. But mostly love. Always love. Dante's arm came around my shoulders, pulling me close. You ready for this life, figlia mia? I looked at the assembled dons, at the power players and dangerous men who now treated me with respect, born of fear and recognition. I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible, powerless, drowning. That girl was gone. In her place stood Sofia Salvatore. Daughter, heir, survivor. I was born ready, I said. And I meant it. The waitress who'd once served coffee for tips now commanded an empire. The girl who'd worried about rent now controlled territories worth millions. The daughter who'd never known her father now stood at his right hand, learning to rule a kingdom built on blood and power. Some would call it a tragedy, a corruption of innocence. But as I stood there, surrounded by family, both born and chosen, I knew the truth. I hadn't been corrupted. I'd been awakened. This was always who I was meant to be. And I wouldn't apologize for it, not to anyone.